Hello, I'm Anastasiya Lavrina. Welcome to Context. In a letter addressed to the members of the PKK, an outlawed entity recognized as a terrorist organization by Turkey, the UK, the European Union and the United States, Abdullah Öcalan, the group's founding leader, called for it to lay down its arms and dissolve itself. This momentous announcement is also viewed as a call on what is referred to as the Syrian wing of the PKK, that is the Syrian Democratic Forces based in northeastern Syria, to integrate into the Syrian political system. In many ways, this development could, many believe, most certainly will, a considerable upon the region, with essential dynamics being affected, producing a new reality. In a letter read out by his political allies in Istanbul, Abdullah Öcalan expressed his take on why the PKK has become redundant, adding that all of this related to Turkey's Kurdish population should be resolved. I quote, "Under the roof of the Turkish Grand National Assembly by encompassing all segments of society." In this response to Öcalan's call, Efkan Ala, deputy chair of the ruling Justice and Development Party, stated that if the terrorist organization decided to evaluate this call, lay down its weapons, disband, it would free Turkey from its shackles, adding that the PKK would bear the consequences if it didn't comply. Well, a number of questions to be asked. In a statement, Öcalan expressed that the PKK has completed its life and that its dissolution is now necessary. But what does this call mean for the future of the Kurdish-Turkish relations? Will this be the long-awaited turning point in a conflict that has spanned over 40 years? More details in my program right now. Joining me is Dr. Melih Demirtas, former Turkish diplomat, researcher at Cappadocia University in Turkey. Well, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Ms. Lavrina.
Thank you very much. So first things first, how important is this development? Why now? Öcalan's call for the PKK to lay down arms and dissolve itself is a monumental shift. From a research perspective, what historical or social factors do you think led Öcalan to make this decision at this particular point in time?
Thank you, Ms. Lavrina. Yes, it's an important shift. Also in internal politics, but also in foreign policy and international relations of this geography. I mean, the Middle Eastern region, also the Eurasian region, affected harshly and in very negative, I think in the last 40 years, maybe 45 years. And with the atmosphere of the Cold War, as also terrorist leader Öcalan in his letter, this Cold War environment really affected all the relations with Turkey once upon a time. I mean, internally, but also externally. Turkey has spent many years, but also much energy to this issue, both economically, also humanitarian senses. We just really spent, I think, maybe generations of all countries to this human and to this security problem. And now, in one night, maybe in 1 week, we just saw that maybe these issues can be also solved, but at least maybe diplomatically negotiable between the sides. Although one of the sides represents a real terrorist organization, which do not hesitate to kill babies, teachers, many public servants for years. And now, in the atmosphere, which we now see, we see changes in Syria. Please do not forget, just 3 months ago, a very radical and rapid change in Syria happened. And of course, Israel's very political move still going on in the southern Syria, but also another humanitarian, very devastating situation in Gaza and Lebanon. And all these situations are also affected by a new president, which is the United States new President Trump, and his very rapid decisions. And I think all these balances and all these factors can be calculated and can be, included in this letter of this terrorist leader Öcalan yesterday night.
Dr. Demirtas, indeed very interesting, but is it a plea or order? And Does Öcalan's statement in itself constitute a formal dissolution of the PKK? His statement refers to a Congress that will need to be convened to make a decision. The PKK, recognized as a terrorist organization, has always been outside the realm of the law. The question is, what will happen to its members and how they will be integrated into Turkish society and the political life of the country?
Yeah, thank you, Lavrina. Because this Kurdish people, Kurdish minority, has an important also history in this, not in Turkey, but in Syria, in Iran, or in Iraq. We could not deny this deep and very wide historical reality of Kurdish population. We are always, of course, making some alliances, and we really feel for this 1,000 years of friendship and, of course, alliance with all the leaders and all the members of the population, Kurds and Turkish communities. But this, of course, alliance and friendship was really interrupted, starting with the second half of this Cold War, maybe atmosphere. Of course, some states and some shares, unfortunately, to see the shares of these states, some big and very influential states in this geography. And unfortunately, we see that not only PKK, but also in some other states, we saw another branches of some groups which are using this terroristic tactics against the other, central authorities. Not only, of course, Ankara and the other capitals, but also this Damascus, the Baghdad, also Tehran, all these capitals, we can feel some hesitation, in the past, in the last, especially 20 and 30 years, to communicate directly with these leaders or the members of the organization. But now, I think this rapid change, especially in Syria, after this interim government's Mr. al-Shara's maybe decisions to make some rapid and wider connections with the Western world, with Russia even, and now we can see that this organization, PKK, made this important decision maybe to behave with terrorist leader Öcalan's important announcement. But another branch, for example, which we call SPG, I think they still do not see any future to have this decision to be implemented. I do not want to make any negative comment about this, but still we must wait and we must hope that this terroristic line also they use some really important military tactics against central authorities also in Syria. In Turkey also they have very negative moves. But now this forces, all these northeast Syria, must also behave and must maybe act in accordance with this terrorist leader's Öcalan's decision. And so, they must, in parallel,
Dr. Demirtas, I'm sorry.
Put their weapons.
The key question here now is, does this mean an end of the conflict between the PKK and Turkey?
We can say so. Because terrorist leader Öcalan has a symbolic name for years. Yes, we know. There have been other leaders, maybe some young generations, which we can call maybe some, heroes also, quote unquote, in some leaders' minds and eyes because of this rise of, again, quote unquote, extremist Islam, this ISIL, ISIS, whatever you call. Please do not forget that all this, acts after the 9/11, especially all Western partners, need some other partners inside this geography. And now they created another forces inside this geography, especially northern Syria and Iraq, and they can call them like the fighters in the name of the freedom. The Kurdish fighters, Kurdish women, and especially some young people who are really acting against extremism and everything. But they constructed, I think, this reality so suddenly. Because as we all see that the extremist Islamism has also come to an end, maybe somehow, with the important diplomacy they call. But please do not forget this nation states, when all these powers have some forces to change this agenda in one night or in 1 week. Now we say that this terrorist leader Öcalan is a symbolic name, and his decision means a lot, I think, for this generation, especially for the stronger generations inside the Kurdish population.
Dr. Demirtas, some analysts are suggesting that Öcalan's message is a direct response to the growing international pressure. Do you agree with that, and how much do you think international diplomatic factors are influencing this internal shift?
Yes, I think this is the number one maybe thing we must calculate in this important dynamic in the region. Because please, as I said in my first answer, do not forget that this environment changes so radically in this last 3-4 months. And I want to repeat again that Mr. Trump's very, I think, different diplomatic style and very brave and open diplomatic style. Even he can now really and directly have an agreement with Mr. Putin and with Russia, which, I mean, the traditional American, I think, foreign policy or military diplomacy do not want to see any such result in such a very short, decision-making time. But now he did, I think, very radical things inside this also foreign policy corridors. And I think all these agreements between Mr. Putin, between Mr. Trump, and of course all the changes in Syria, and I think Israel's moves and Israel's maybe military force and his maybe future plans, we don't know still in southern Syria because already Mr. Netanyahu repeats to understanding this. We want to stay in this wider geography, I mean, including southern Syria. Now, all this balance is showing us that some organizations, I mean, if they are also very separatist or terrorist organizations, do not have any places anymore in this very changing diplomatic atmosphere. And I think Mr. Trump's directly affecting this environment, in my humble opinion.
I guess it's important to mention here that Öcalan speaks of an alliance between Kurds and Turks as historically necessary to survive against hegemonic powers. What do you make of this statement?
Yes, it's an important academic text. Right? If you write as an academician such a text, it could be an article with so many important terms. But we cannot forget that his figure is an important terrorist figure, and he really chose to use this Cold War brutal tactics of terrorism. Because in many parts of the geography, even in Azerbaijan, please do not forget Armenian tactics of terroristic humanitarian methods. Also, in other parts of Asia, Latin America, even in Europe, we saw that these Cold War years are very inhumanitarian years in terms of positive diplomacy. And many sides lost many people, many sides lost also energy and time and economic sources, and Turkey is maybe in one of the important first places of those countries. And I can say that Mr. Öcalan's words, yes, they're important because, yes, there are some hegemonic voices inside the geography, especially for this 20th century time. But before that also, this hegemony is an important problem in international relations. But still, Öcalan and the other similar figures must know that they must not turn into tools. They must not turn like apparatchiks, maybe we can call this in Russian. They must not turn into such instruments of such hegemonies, even 1 year, 1 month, and even 1 day in their lives. But Mr. Öcalan, I think, turned into such an instrument for many years.
Dr. Demirtas, let's look more in details into the Syrian component of the story. Will SDF comply? We heard from its leaders, we do heard a lot about this statement. So what about the future of this within the Syrian political life, domestic and foreign?
Syria is changing so fastly. My first responses are that, as I said, making this fast. Of course, there's a baggage, there's a legacy of this Islamism, quote unquote, because many of their members, figures, had some acts and actions in the name of some Islamic or religious ideals. We know that, and the people, especially some European partners, also had some hesitations, maybe to make some connections, direct connections with them. But still, I think they need time to combine their own forces, I mean, in community sense, in democratic sense. Yes, we can maybe see them as some baggage holders with some important actions against some central authorities. Even some of these actions can be called as some terroristic actions. But still, for the sake of the turn with a democratic style of thinking, because after Assad regime, after Baath regime of the 50, 60 years of brutal and violent repressive regime, maybe such democratic voices must be given a chance. Yes, Kurdish people, it's also an important stake, an important sharing in the future of Syria, because Syria, as a land of 1,000, 2,000 or 3,000 years of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and also with many kinds of ethnic populations, think about Damascus and Aleppo's history, for example. And if we think this historical deep reality, I think we must give, first of all, this chance to Syria. And we are glad to think that with European also, countries, of course, Turkey and the other neighboring countries, also even Russia, they have some very rapid connections with the regime now in Damascus, the interim government in Damascus. And we are glad to see this democratic consolidation. And I hope that the northern Syria, I mean, after this declaration of terrorist leader Öcalan, also will enjoy and will maybe join to this central democratic authority in Damascus now.
And lastly, Dr. Demirtas, there is also always the question of how much change one individual statement can truly drive, especially when it's tied to such a complex and long-lasting conflict. What do you think it will take beyond Öcalan's words for real peace to emerge between the Turkish state and the Kurdish population?
Yes, thank you. Because foreign policy needs also some domestic changes. We know that the internal politics and domestic and foreign politics cannot be separated so easily. Yes, some experts are separating them very easily and say that no, foreign policy is this, and internal or domestic understanding can change so easily. I don't share this opinion because we need some democratic ideals in all the countries. The age of democracy still continues, although in many lands, although in many countries, we know that some democratic ideals are shaken. Even there are, of course, some electoral elections are still so important. We cannot say that all these democratic ideals are still going on in the world. The rise of the far-right parties, the rise of opportunism, harsh conservatism, and everything can really harm democratic ideals. Now, I think in Turkey, we really pursue this ideal. I think for longer years, we really do our best because the amalgamation of different kind of population, different kind of, historical realities in Turkey, really we did our best and still doing our best to combine all these voices in one pot. Yes, there can be some interruptions, there can be some changes and reform ideals, but after this, I think combining these democratic and domestic ideals with these foreign policy openings, I think we can have a chance to take this into action. And even it comes from a terrorist leader, as I wanted to repeat again, because this terrorist leader had really an important baggage again with all these terroristic acts. Even this comes from such a figure, we must think about that diplomacy can work and the sides and the people can, in the name of humanity, in the name of one human life, we can come together and to share the opinion for the future of our region, also for the Middle Eastern, but also for Eurasian wider senses to make this region more, of course, stable and peaceful.
Well, Dr. Demirtas, thank you so much for joining our discussion today.
Ms. Lavrina, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Just to remind, today with us we had Dr. Melik Demirtas, former Turkish diplomat, researcher at Cappadocia University in Turkey. Dear viewers, do stay with A News and see you soon.